How is it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Anton Dyball. You probably know me as a skeptical human on YouTube, and I'm also the founder of the newly created online store, skepticalstuff.com. Joining me today for a fantastic podcast conversation is fellow YouTuber, The Lone Chemist. He mostly focuses on his channel. He does video essays where he critiques filmmakers, talks about what he likes and doesn't like about certain films, things of that nature. He also has a second channel where he hosts a podcast conversation. It's called The Lone Chemist Podcast, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep.
Lone Chemist Podcast. There he's had such distinguished guests as High Top Films and Brown Table for really wide-ranging conversations about all kinds of things. And he's also a PhD student who's studying organic atmospheric chemistry, who's published in Organic Letters and the Journal of the American Chemical Society. His YouTube video focusing on why Thanos is the perfect movie villain has over 1.5 million views on YouTube. And today we're going to talk about all kinds of interesting things, so please join me in welcoming The Lone Chemist, my good friend Johnny Varelis.
Wow, that was a powerful introduction. Damn.
I tried it. Could have done better on it, but wanted to make it interesting.
Very professional. Good.
Awesome. So I wanted to start out today by talking about the MGTOW movement. I'll just provide a little background information about like who they are, what their general views are, and I just wanted to talk about what we agree with them on, what we disagree with them on, and things of that nature. So MGTOW, it stands for Men Going Their Own Way, and it's basically this organization where I would describe it as like disgruntled men who are frustrated with the dating community, with male-female relationship dynamics, with what they call is like the flawed female nature, and things like that. And they're very active online on various subreddits and YouTube channels and things like that. I just wanted to start out by getting your general take on the MGTOW movement. What do you think they get right? What do you think they get wrong? What are your thoughts?
I think that whole movement strikes me as kind of bifurcated in a way. So on one hand, I do think that they raise some legitimate concerns about some things, I guess kind of like the pseudo-sexual movement with like women and men, their relation to each other. But a lot of that kind of stuff kind of just seems like they're just frustrated they can't get laid. Like, to be honest with you, they kind of and this is kind of my problem with a lot of these kind of Reddit-based movements. They kind of put all of their identity on whether or not they can get laid and get a girl and get married and stuff. So I feel like they're just kind of externalizing an internal struggle by putting all of their focus on, things that have to relate with sexuality or becoming like a real man by getting a wife and stuff. I think it just kind of is, I guess, a little bit counterintuitive to personal development, because if you're constantly saying that a certain demographic or a certain person is responsible for your misgrievances, then I guess you're not really being self-reflective at all, if that makes any sense.
Definitely, yeah, I would agree with that. It is important to point out there's a lot of variety in this movement. It's not like every person who labels themselves MGTOW holds the same set of views. There's a whole spectrum that the viewpoints fall within. But the general impression that I get when I listen to the way that they talk and the attitude they have towards women is pretty similar to what you said. It seems like people who are just frustrated about the fact that they can't get laid, they haven't had much success with women, and in a way they're projecting a lot of their own insecurities and frustrations onto women and sort of blaming female nature and things like that, and the way women are wired for their own inadequacies and failures in this space. And like you said, that's not the correct way to go about it, because you're not going to improve yourself if what you're doing is just blaming other people for your own shortcomings and failures and stuff like that. When you have the people who talk about, women, they're all they care about is they're gold diggers, they care about the muscular chads and stuff like that, and it's just unfair and things like that. Even if we granted for the sake of argument, like that's the way it is set up, where they do have those biases. You could complain about it on the internet, or you could work to improve yourself. You could exercise. You could get in good shape. You could work on improving your personality, becoming funnier, advancing in your career to make yourself seem like a more prospective, attractive mate to them. So I just don't like the way they go about it.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. They have this tagline of going your own way, but I mean, like you said, wouldn't that have to relate to some kind of aspect of self-reflection if you're going to be actually going your own way? Because I feel like they're just attributing all their struggles to like another person, which is kind of antithetical and hypocritical to what they actually preach and what they actually believe, what like quote unquote believe. Yeah.
I think one of the funniest things about the MGTOW community is the fact that you look at the name of the group that they ascribe to themselves, men going their own way. It's like, we're going to focus on ourselves. We're going to focus on, we're not going to worry about women. We're going to only focus on our own endeavors and self-improvement. And we're not going to care about women. All they fucking do is talk about women. All they talk about. Every YouTube video, they're talking about women, how terrible they are. So if you truly are going to go your way, why don't you actually go your own way and not just like continually just spend every single day in comment sections and subreddits talking about how horrible women are? I always thought that was kind of funny, and it seems like the irony is lost on them.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, that kind of relates to a lot of these reactionary internet movements. I mean, like, for example, if you look at like the anti-SJW community on YouTube, for example, all they care about is how unimportant and how irrelevant and stupid SJWs are. But that's the entire basis of their commentary, is just shitting on these people. If they are that unimportant, that stupid, and that meaningless to you, then why are you spending 90 minutes in a YouTube video or conversation just like so mad about them? It's like, if it really doesn't matter to you all that much, then please just stop talking about it. I think we'd all benefit from that.
Yeah, for sure. And another problem I have with them is that they really seem to generalize. Like, without a doubt, you can point to many examples of women in relationships who cheat on their partners, who lie to their partners, who only care about money. Without a doubt, there are women who are like that, who are shallow. Like, all the critiques they have, certain women it does apply to. But I think the fundamental mistake they make is just generalizing that and mapping that onto all women and saying, like, because, these two women I dated in the past were like this, it's female nature, this is how it is, the whole system is rigged. And I think that's just, logically, it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like I said, I think they're externalizing an internal struggle. I mean, like, I don't think their problem so much is with women generally. It's just the fact that, like, they're just frustrated again. They just can't get laid. Like, it just, and like, I feel like all of their problems stem from that. And even though they may protest differently, I feel like I think your first point you brought up was like the best thing they could possibly do. Like, if you were really interested in getting laid, or like maybe even abstaining women until you actually can, wouldn't you want to improve yourself, get in better shape, read more, get more intelligent, and actually become the person that could actually get laid? Like, it seems like it's I don't know. A lot of those Reddit movements really piss me off. I mean, like, my question is, like, what's the dividing line between the incel and then men going their own way? Is it like an incel that's aware of themselves, or like, are they just kind of, different flavors of the same ice cream?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting question to ask, and I think there is a lot of crossover between not just those two movements, but also in general the online pickup community, the online dating advice community. Yeah. I personally, when I was a couple years younger, when I used to be a lot less confident and had a lot of difficulties with women, I definitely fell down that rabbit hole of, the online pickup community and so forth, where I would just watch tons of videos and it's like cold approaches and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that like the whole movement is bankrupt. A lot of the advice they give is solid, where you should like work on improving yourself. And it kind of depends on which people you listen to. Some of them, there's a lot of misogyny. A lot of the advice I think is trash. Others, they just have really good practical advice for like, focus on improving yourself, becoming successful in your career, and then you'll become more attractive to women. So similar thing like with the MGTOW community, there's a lot of variation there, and you can't just like paint them all with one broad brush. I think the fact that there is so much crossover between these three movements is pretty solid proof that their viewpoints do stem in large part from that sort of sexual frustration that you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, like, but I guess like the dividing line would be, all right, so like if you're involuntarily celibate, that means that there's nothing you can do about it, I guess, is like, there's like an acceptance there or something like that. And then with the MGTOW movement, it's like they understand their shortcomings and they just choose to embrace them. Like, it's just like yeah, I guess like the lines are kind of blurred between all those communities, but yeah, I guess, yeah, I'd agree that it's all based on the sexual frustration point for sure.
Yeah, and the acceptance part, that's one of the most demoralizing aspects of it, I think, because it's, especially among incels, it seems really disempowering to label yourself
Yeah.
that way. And it's like they're accepting defeat by labeling themselves. And, you know, Tony Robbins, he talks a lot about how, like, we act in accordance with the labels that we apply to ourselves. Like, if you call yourself a smoker and you're like, I've always been a smoker, you're going to have a hard time quitting smoking. So the way you identify, how you think about yourself, how you describe yourself to the world, I think in large part affects the way that you actually act in the world.
Yeah, it's like
and kind of handicaps you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, you know, if you believe something's going to happen and you attribute all of your identity to that certain thing, then chances are it's going to stay consistent, right? I actually did a video essay about this. The first one that I did on my channel was about American Psycho with Christian Bale. It's talking about how the movie is representative of something called collective identity. So collective identity, for people who don't know, like, you know, philosophical or psychological terms, is basically it's when an entire group subscribes to the same ideology. And it's not just groupthink of thinking the certain way. It's the complete alignment of all beliefs and all characteristics and all basically internal and external traits of a society. And so it's kind of interesting that you bring up that, you know, subscribing to a certain belief set and then having that manifest in the world, because I feel like that's so common in pretty much everything in life. Like, if you believe something is going to happen, then it probably will, like, at a certain point. And so I feel like you said, that acceptance is the most demoralizing part. And I feel like for these online communities to not fester and increase in population of disenfranchised people, people have to learn that, you know, self-improvement is always an option, I feel like.
You know what it reminds me of a little bit is Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the main problems I have with that organization is that one of their core tenets, like one of the first steps, they say, accept that you're powerless, accept that you can't do, you know, you're an addict. And it's a similar kind of thing where they're labeling themselves in advance in such a way that it kind of handicaps their progress. And I think they'd benefit much more if instead they took it in the empowering direction. Like, no, currently you may be an addict, but you can overcome this. You can work through this. You can establish better habits. You can find ways to rewire your brain and break some of those habit patterns of thought and so forth. It's really a similar process, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, it's more empowering to not just wallow in your problem, but to accept that you have a problem and then think, okay, what am I meant to learn from this and how can I move forward? I feel like And I mean, of course, we can't really correlate addiction to alcohol like completely with, like, you know, the Reddit online movement and stuff, because of course there's the physiological element there for sure. But I would agree that, like, the mentality of the problem is definitely in more ways correlative than not, for sure.
Something else I would point out about MGTOW is you could also make the obvious observation that a lot of the traits they point to, focusing, you know, women focusing on like more attractive mates that they leave their partner for. You know, it's like something better pops up and they're like, I'm going to dump this guy and jump to this guy instead. Or something like cheating on their partner or being dishonest. You could obviously make the same point that a lot of men do that too. And it would be equally as illogical to generalize and be like, all men are pigs or something like that. Like you see a lot of the more extremist feminist types do, where they just sort of write all men off as a lost cause, because some percentage of them are flawed. It's kind of a similar process.
No, I totally agree. Like, you know, painting whatever the opposite sex is as a demonic figure is definitely synonymous across both of those. I remember, like, I actually, before I even was informed of the MGTOW movement, I was, like, on Reddit and I was reading some posts and stuff. And so one post that I read that was particularly enlightening and also kind of, you know, disturbing was there was a guy on the MGTOW, like, tab that I saw a screenshot of, and basically what he was doing was he was kind of, I guess, rationalizing why there's a double standard for sex for women and men. So, like, you know, why men are able to be more promiscuous and why women, you know, in the minds of more conservatively minded, like, sexual people are not supposed to be. And so this guy made a point saying that, like, you know, if a man were to walk in the middle of a bar and say, who wants to have sex with me? No one's going to, you know, respond to him, right? And if a woman did the exact same thing, you can probably guess that there's, like, a bunch of, like, thirsty people that would be like, oh, yeah, pick me, pick me. But I feel like having that standard of, like, you know, the baseline for women is, like, sexual promiscuity, I feel like that further skews, like, the perception of women, and it just kind of feeds, like, the mentality that, like, you know, they have all of the power in your life. And like you said, I think it's just it goes completely antithetical to what they actually believe if they're going to, you know, empower themselves and go their own way. Well, I mean, if you're still basing everything on that baseline sex drive from women, aren't you kind of not really practicing what you preach?
Right, and it's kind of interesting that you talk about how they frame women as having all the power like that. And if you think about it, that's another example where they sort of handicap themselves, because by conceptualizing it in that way, they're putting themselves in that lower, inferior position where the woman is above them. It's not an equal where it's like you're trying to find a suitable partner who has valuable traits and is worth your time. But instead, they sort of put themselves in that bottom position, and they're like, this is the way it is. Whereas I think when you become more confident and better with relationships and so forth, you do start to view it more as like that search for someone who can be an equal partner, and not someone who's up on this pedestal where you view them as having all the power in the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, they're viewing it as more commensalist as opposed to symbiotic, right? I mean, commensalism is like, you both mutually benefit, but one benefits more than the other. But symbiotically, I think you should look at it more like that. Like, you're supposed to, if you meet somebody in sort of relationship, it's not because you want to, like, beg them to, have sex with you or, like, get laid or start a relationship or whatever. It should be a common goal.
Dude, I've been doing it all wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Dude, like, and some of those people, man, it's like just have a tiny bit of self-reflection. Like, holy hell. Like, it's like, I think this kind of boils down to like a general point, like that we've been kind of teasing. There are more things in life to worry about than getting laid. Like, like, I promise, there are like more things that are, more important in certain stages of life than getting laid. I mean, of course, if you look at like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something like that, then, love and fulfillment is definitely one of the most important ones we can ascribe to as humans. Also, I like your octopus mug, by the way. That's pretty sweet.
Appreciate that. It's a good one for podcasting.
But yeah, I just think that, God, I lost my train of thought. The octopus mug distracted me now. Damn.
It's very captivating, I know. No, I'm sure there are some MGTOWs that clicked on this video because they saw that it was being discussed.
Yeah.
And I do want to reiterate that point, that there is a lot of variety, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who at this point already have probably posted comments saying something like, not all MGTOWs are like this, you're misrepresenting our views. So let's take this conversation in a different direction and talk about the different strains of MGTOW, the parts of it that we do agree with.
Okay.
What we think that they get right in certain areas, and just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think that generally a point that they got correct is, there is a good observation they make about the complete imbalance of sexual power within, the dating community today, right? I mean, even though it's not really necessarily true that women have all the power, there are things in society that, women do have more of a selection process for mates than men do, right? So I feel like, they're aware of that. And even if their solution is not really one that I particularly agree with, the general point, I think, is relatively consistent in the fact that, yes, men are the ones who, like, have to prove themselves to women in a certain way because, women are completely bombarded with advances most of the time. And so, like, they have more of a selection process. But again, even if that's true, that doesn't mean that, they are responsible 100% for the entire, dating enterprise or the pursuit of a happy life. But I think that point generally, I think that it is relatively okay. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that? Hello?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Sorry, I got a little choppy there for a second.
That's
so,
good.
I mean, from a biological standpoint, females generally are the choosier mates, not just humans. Most species you look at, because they invest so much more energy into bearing offspring.
Yeah.
Men, they just have sperm, they ejaculate, and they can just move on to the next mate. Whereas women, because they invest so much energy into growing the organism inside of them, giving birth to it, suckling it, nurturing it, and so forth, obviously it makes sense from a biological standpoint to be more picky about your mate process. So it's not like I was saying earlier that they're all wrong when they say that females are choosier and they do have more options.
Yeah.
There is a biological reality to that. The point I was making was more so like there's choosiness on both ends, I guess. So don't just view yourself as like a victim of this process. One thing I do agree with them on, though, is the general standpoint that especially when you have big goals, you have big dreams, you know what you want in life, you're not where you want to be in your career. Relationships, dating can be very time consuming, can be very distracting in terms of your thoughts. I know personally when I'm in a relationship, it's on my thoughts a lot more. It can be very distracting. It can be a very emotional process with ups and downs where when you're trying to focus on like writing a script for your next video or something, and you're thinking about like an argument you just had or whatever, or some problems in your relationship, that shit's distracting. It can sap your energy. It can make you less productive. So personally, as somebody who's trying to grow a YouTube channel, who's, you know, setting up an online store and trying to turn it into a scalable business and so forth, I 100% sympathize with the viewpoint that if you're not where you want to be in life, maybe put dating on hold, maybe don't jump into a relationship, maybe get yourself where you want to be first, and then start looking for that. That's one part of it where I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, I agree with that sentiment for sure, because like you said, dating can be time consuming. But yeah, so the problem that I have with the mindset of that, though, is not so much saying or admitting or realizing that dating can be time consuming and is a taxing process. My problem is they preach that, okay, we're not going to worry about this aspect of our lives anymore, but the whole premise of this movement is to completely be hyper aware of that part of their lives, like, you know, sexual frustration and so forth. So I feel like in that way, like, you know, you really should divorce yourself from the idea that you need to date completely. You don't need to, you know, have this like kind of weird resentment towards women or something like that. I feel like you need to be able to just, you know, be happy focusing on the things that really matter in life, as opposed to things that, you know, that you say you don't really care about, but you obviously do.
No, I think I see what you're saying. Basically, you're saying, like, maybe the abstaining makes sense, but not the negativity. Like, the negativity.
Yeah, the resentment. Like the resentment is kind of goes hand in hand with, like, you know, some of these people. I mean, obviously not all. I'm not saying that all of them are like this, and, like, a lot of them I do really sympathize with, like you said. But my point is, like, if you were going to completely, you know, abstain from dating advances or sexual conquests or whatever, then you can't just pick and choose, and you can't ascribe resentment when you're already abstaining from it, when you already admitted that it's distracting and it's not really, you know, conducive to that certain time period in your life. But yeah, I would agree that the general point remains that a relationship can be taxing. I mean, like, for sure. I mean, I'm dating the best girl now, for sure. Like, she's the best, but obviously you want to spend more time with them, so it's not always a negative taxing experience. Like, you want to grow your relationship and spend more time. Yeah.
Something else I think I agree with them on for the most part is a lot of the critiques they have of marriage laws in this country and how jumping into a marriage isn't a very good idea given the way that our legal system is set up. Something you'll hear the MGTOW community talk a lot about is how when you get married to somebody, if you just look at the statistics, you see that half of marriages end in divorce. Of those that stay together, some percent is unhappy, yet they stay together for the kids because they don't believe in divorce as a matter of religious principle.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they're old and they don't think that they can find another mate, so they're just stuck with it. So if you look at what percent of marriages actually stay happy, it's a small percent of them. And then if you do decide to go to the divorce route, especially if you're a man who is fairly successful or has big dreams about becoming wealthy or advancing in your career, then you have the problem of alimony payments that could happen for years, maybe even for the rest of your life in some cases. You know, the dividing up of half your assets and so forth. And a question they often point to, and it's, I think, a good one actually, is why bother getting the state involved in this? Why put pen to paper? Why make it a legal contract that could end up in an ugly divorce proceeding with a lawyer who's trying to take everything that you have, get as much that he can out of you? And it turns into this long, protracted legal battle. Whereas in traditional relationships, if things don't work out, you break things off. Worst case scenario, it takes a couple months or two for that whole process to be finalized if you have to move out, break up a lease or whatever. But it's a much simpler process than getting the state involved, and that's one area where I think they actually make some good points.
Yeah, no. On that same token, I mean, and this may go into like more like MRA like kind of esque stuff, but the divorce laws and the divorce settlements in this country, like, I 100% agree that they're absolutely fucked. And one thing that, like, you know, those people do complain about that I totally agree with is custody declarements. You know, like, if you have kids and you're getting divorced from your wife, then I think, what is it, like 78% chance that the wife is going to retain like 100% the custody of the kids. I can't imagine how fucking devastating that is if you're a father and want to be a father, and then like they're basically almost taken away from you, societally speaking. So in that sense, right. I 100% agree that like the inequality there is definitely justified by the data for sure.
One other thing you'll sometimes hear them talk about, which I also sympathize with, at least personally, it's not something that I think is more generalizable like the marriage law critique, but personally I have no interest in having kids, not interested. I don't like 90% of kids. I think they're annoying. I'm not good at interacting with them. And I don't want to spend my time that way. I'm really big on personal productivity, personal effectiveness, setting big goals and going after it. And I think spending decades of my life raising children, having to take them to fucking soccer practice and help them with their homework and shit like that, I want no part of it. I'm not interested in it. I don't want to spend my time that way. That's a personal decision on my part. One thing you hear people in the MGTOW community talk about, though, is like if you get involved in a relationship, there's always the risk that you end up impregnating somebody, then you're stuck with kids, your life is fucked, your dreams get flushed down the toilet, and that's something that absolutely terrifies me. It's just, I have all these big goals in my life, and what if I just knock some chick up, and then it's just like, boom, there go my dreams in life, and it's like, what could be me going at 100% full steam because I have all these obligations now with raising children, even if, I opt out of it and have to pay child support or something, having to work another job or make more money to provide those child support payments, at the the most effective I could be at that point, I'd be operating at like 50% of my potential. So that's something that really scares me, and it's something I agree with him on.
Yeah, man, obviously having kids is not for everybody, and obviously, I would like to have kids someday, but not anytime soon. Let's put it this way. Being a graduate student in chemistry has really humbled me to time management. So I definitely do not want to have kids at this point in my life, at least for a while. But I do agree that having kids and being expected to be a father to them, obviously if you're a biological parent, is definitely a taxing thing for sure. So on that point, I definitely agree with you that it's a pretty time consuming endeavor to have a kid.
So I wanted to switch gears now and talk about the NoFap community. It's obviously, as the name suggests, it's an organization that's basically opposed to masturbation. Now, I want to make it very clear at the outset that this is going to be a very frank conversation. We are not going to be beating around the bush here, literally in this case. There's going to be a lot of very straightforward language being used here, so just be aware of that. We're going to try our best to have an enjoyable but adult conversation about it, but I do want to get your thoughts about the NoFap movement.
Again, it's kind of bifurcated in a similar way with the MGTOW movement. I do think that the perception of sex within our society has been warped by the consumption and, albeit the frequent consumption of pornography. And I feel like, for men especially, there's a lot of data that supports, that does at a certain age warp your perception of what sex actually is and how you can be fulfilled by a sexual relationship as you get older. So I have no problem saying that porn in moderation should be exercised. I don't think that it's healthy to completely indulge in every sexual fantasy. What bothers me is just the mental state that this is something that is wrong and terrible and you should be ashamed of doing this. And again, it's kind of bifurcated because the NoFap movement is on one hand, it's more focused on pornography abstaining. On the other half, it's just I want to be more productive with my entire life. So I think that making this thing more of a demonic and reprehensible force, I think is in some ways good because it can kind of wake you up to some of the more harmful psychological long-term benefits of using pornography or being addicted to masturbation. But I think that it kind of boils down to everything that we've said. I think everything in moderation is okay. I think that as long as you're able to be an adult and have more perspective on things and be able to manage your time and not be consumed by a hobby where it's muscular or something else. I feel like you should exercise a little more perspective as you get older with those kind of things. That makes any sense?
No, I think that was a good analysis, and I would agree with that. Similar with MGTOW, whole spectrum of belief. You can't paint them all with one broad brush. What I noticed, though, while looking into the NoFap movement and just listening to their arguments and the viewpoints they have, is it almost reminds me of a religion. It's almost cult-like.
Yeah.
The degree to which so many of them are so vehemently opposed.
It's like the Brotherhood. They call it the Brotherhood, right, or something like that. I
don't know. Yeah, they have all kinds of weird labels they use and terminology and stuff.
Yeah.
It's almost cult-like, the degree to which they're opposed to masturbating. They view it as this dirty, shameful, evil thing, similar to what a Catholic nun might tell you as she's spanking you with a ruler, which incidentally might be some of the fantasies these people indulge in, but that's a separate subject. But yeah, it's almost cult-like how they're so against it. There's this one YouTube channel, I can't remember the guy's name, but I was just watching some NoFap videos, just perplexed and just amazed at what these people are talking about. And I sort of went down the rabbit hole. He's a licensed therapist who focuses on sex addicts and pornography and stuff, but every single video he keeps repeating questions like, ask yourself, what would your life be like 3 years from now if you stopped masturbating, stopped watching pornography? And I just remember asking myself, and I was like, it'd probably be about the same. It's not like I'm spending hours every single day watching pornography, and he kept talking about like the hours you would save every single day, and I'm like, who the fuck would spend hours watching porn every day? Is it people who don't understand that you can fast forward and skip to the good parts in a porn, and they're just like, man, this introduction is taking forever. Will this plumber just pull his dick out already so I can just get this done and move on? I don't know. It's like he talks about it like everyone is just spending hours in front of a computer, when realistically it's like a few minutes per session. So it's the degree of opposition to it doesn't seem to scale with the degree of harm. That's my take on it.
Well, I mean, just to be fair, you know, to raise a bit of a counterpoint, there has been a lot of psychosomatic and psychosexual research in the brain where basically, you know, viewing pornography releases dopamine in similar levels to something like, you know, methamphetamine or heroin, for example. So, like, the reason people are so opposed to it in this certain case is because it affects the same pleasure center and the reward center in the brain. So I do agree in some sense that, like, you know, completely unadulterated pleasure is harmful in long doses because, of course, you know, like I said, everything is okay in moderation, but if you blow it out of proportion, then it's terrible. I just think that, like, the complete demonization of an entire act is kind of silly. Like, I feel like, again, to have more perspective, you should be able to, you know, not watch porn for 6 and 7 hours a day or some shit. I feel like if you really have other things to worry about that are more important, I think you should be able to press pause and maybe go to the part where the handyman, you know, porks the woman behind the dumpster or some shit. But I just think that, like, the complete demonization of that is just kind of like that group's downfall. I think that they're on some good things because, of course, like, you know, there is, I mean, like, I'm a chemist, right? Like, I read a lot of literature scientifically, and, like, there is a lot of research that supports, like, you know, pornography affecting the same areas in the brain that are affected by drug addiction. But I just think that, you know, having this, like, cult-like movement is just kind of a weird, like, non-correlative reaction to the whole problem, where I think just basic time management and a basic reality check on the realities of sexual interactions with women, I feel like is probably the more pressing factor there, as opposed to, like, having a countdown in your fucking, like, I don't know, like your Reddit page where, like, how many days since you've masturbated. It's like, you know, this many days since an accident, like, you know, in a construction site. Like, they rip the signs down and shit.
Right.
Yeah, but that's probably my take on that. I just think that, you know, keeping perspective on what's important in life is probably the best remedy for that, as opposed to, you know, just counting down days until you've jerked off.
Yeah, I think we obviously do need to make the caveat that there are some people who are legitimate porn addicts. The people he's talking about where he's like hours a day watching porn, there is a point where it does become a problem, where it's like you have if you're spending literally hours a day watching porn, it does sound like an issue. That is one aspect, what you talked about, where I totally agree with them, that if you're just giving into all of these dopamine-releasing triggers constantly, it's going to sort of fry your brain, it's going to disrupt your ability to focus on important things, and prioritize and do the things that matter to you. And if every time you get an urge or a craving to eat something, or masturbate, or drink something, or take some sort of drug, or smoke a cigarette, if you're just constantly giving into those urges, even with social media, you know, the beeps and buzzes and shit like that, if you're just always getting pulled in these directions, it turns you into the sort of powerless victim who's not really like the captain of his own ship in life, but really is just being blown about by the winds and the direction of the currents and so forth. And that part, I 100% agree with them on. There's this YouTuber by the name of Alex Becker. He does a lot of stuff on, like, the business side of things, sort of like helping small entrepreneurs develop better habits and things like that to improve their lives and grow their business. And I actually watched his take on NoFap, and his, I think, was the most sensible take, where he framed it from that perspective, where he's like, look, I literally just want to discipline myself to where I'm not giving into these dopamine triggers, whatever they are, so that I can just focus all my time and energy on growing my business. And that's the part of it, that's the viewpoint where I'm like, I totally agree with it from a time management perspective, and also from just a personal discipline and focus perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, we have to be able to, like, build in some real mechanisms as humans to turn off pure unadulterated pleasure in any form. Like you said, I mean, there's even studies about, like, how hearing like a Twitter notification will give you a kind of a burst of dopamine or serotonin in your brain. Same thing with, obviously nicotine or caffeine. I mean, I'm a caffeine addict. I'm chugging coffee right now. But like,
Yep.
I feel like if we stick more specifically on the no fat movement, I feel like there's this so obviously I'm gonna go full on pretentious here. So C.S. Lewis wrote that mankind has tried like hell to conquer nature, right? And I feel like the invention of pornography was a way to kind of expedite sexual promiscuity in order to, I guess, for lack of a better term, expedite the process, like give people like a sexual outlet that doesn't involve, dating or whatever. But because of that, and like relating it back to what C.S. Lewis said, because that we've worked so hard to conquer nature, we've let technology therefore conquer us. And I feel like, having those all the voices in your head of just technology and like, pornography and texts and maybe, giving into certain, dopamine releasing triggers and stuff. I feel like it just, like you said, it kind of weakens you as a human being. And like, we have to be able to turn off those mechanisms that, just facilitate pure unadulterated pleasure. Because I mean, if we allow ourselves to be defined by those urges, I mean, what kind of life is that?
Yeah, totally. I would agree with that. And one other part of it that I find kind of amusing in the no-fat movement is how some of them take it to what I think is a pretty absurd and ridiculous degree, where they talk about how abstaining from masturbation almost gives them superpowers. They talk about like the increased ability to focus, and I'm so much more confident with women and so forth from not masturbating. And, my discipline is so much better. And maybe there's something to that, but you listen to the way a lot of them talk. There are even memes in the NoFap community where they talk about like, oh, the laser vision starts around like day 10 or something like that. Where it's like, if only you just stop masturbating, you turn into this Ubermensch, this superhuman who just like rises above his contemporaries and is just on a different plane from them. And it's, personally, I think that's taking it a little far. And if you think about it from a biological perspective, you could really argue both sides. You could say, on the one hand, not masturbating could set up this feedback mechanism inside your body where testosterone increases because your body's like, we need to spread our seed and reproduce, and it makes you more confident, and it makes you more bold, and it makes you more willing to go and talk to that woman. Whereas if you're masturbating, maybe it sort of clamps down on that. You could also argue the opposite though, where it's like masturbating releases that stress, releases the tension, makes you more relaxed and at ease when you talk with women. Whereas if you're not masturbating, it puts you in a position where you're like, desperate and needing to go spread the seed. And I think if you look at the studies on the subject, from what I've seen, it's mixed. Some studies show testosterone does increase a little. Some show that it doesn't. So I don't know exactly what the state of the research is, but I think you could argue both sides, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, the testosterone like data is mixed, obviously, because there's no such thing as like a perfect male fertility study across all populations. There's going to be competing variables there for sure. But one thing that is completely consistent across all those research is after masturbation, there's a hormone called prolactin that's secreted in your body, and that kind of like from the research gives you like almost like a shameful feeling almost after like you ejaculate, which is like if you're on like tab 64 of Pornhub and you said that's really disgusting after you finish, you're like, oh, why'd I do that? But like seriously, I feel like if we were to argue on the side that like the NoFap community is correct, I feel like the buildup of prolactin in your body essentially makes you more of like a dull and listless kind of person. And then also couple that with the testosterone increases. I mean, like, even though there is competing research, there is like a general consensus that testosterone does increase after you don't engage in masturbation for a couple days. But I do agree that, like, I think you could argue both sides. I mean, especially from an evolutionary perspective, because I mean, we're supposed to be incentivized to have offspring. So you could argue that, like, the release in stress and the relaxed nature could be more of an incentive to actually impregnate more. Or if you're arguing from the other side, it could also be, it makes you a dull beta male sissy pansy or something like that.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. You see a lot of them talk about like, oh, I can't believe I used to just waste my time touching my dick while staring at pixels on a screen. They say stuff like that, which I don't know. I just think it's funny the way they formulate it. Sam Harrison, I think it was his book on meditation called Waking Up.
Yeah.
Waking Up is the book. He briefly talks about either masturbating or orgasms, and he talks about, from a meditative perspective, as somebody who's very introspective and pays attention to the physiological way that he feels on the inside, the thoughts he's having, he talks about how the consensus in the meditating community seems to be it actually saps your energy and it makes you lethargic and less energetic afterwards. So if you were to look at it from that perspective, maybe you'd say it is better to not be masturbating, and from that viewpoint, maybe they are onto something. I'm wondering if you've personally had any. You don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. If you've ever tried NoFap, if you've had any personal experiences, or if you've just gone long periods without, and if you've noticed that you felt one way or the other way, what direction you felt in, if there was no difference. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean,
if you want to go there.
No, it's fine. I'm an open book, dude. I'm a video essayist, doctoral student who's also the press graduate student. So, I'm just, bearing my soul. But,
perfect.
Yeah. Let's see. To be honest, man, masturbation's never been that much of a productivity zapper for me. So I've never really felt the need to have a discrete countdown of not masturbating or whatever. I will say that so I'm a PhD student. I'm a doctoral student in chemistry, and obviously there's a lot of time that's associated with that. So I remember there was probably a 2 or 3 month period where I was so busy that I literally didn't even think about sex or anything like that once. And I mean, I guess I to be scientific here, I'd have to have a control subject or something like that, or I don't know how I would do that. That's not illegal, but I think that I would definitely say that I guess I was more productive, quote unquote, but I feel like that's not because I was tapping into some hormonal zen Shangri-La place where I was finally tapping my genetic potential. I think it's just a matter of there's less time to be spent on those things that take away from things that are productive. So I mean, I guess if I were to be really nitty gritty, I guess you could maybe make the argument that the increased testosterone was probably a factor in that, but I wouldn't say it's the operative factor. I think the operative factor would be just general time management and not wasting your time on things that are not productive.
Yeah, something else that has to be pointed out here is that there are so many confounding variables that it's hard to say this one thing or that thing was responsible. Because let's put yourself in a position where, similar to what you were saying, let's say you're really focused on your work in chemistry for a 1, 2, 3 month period, or you're really just putting all your energy into growing your business or growing your YouTube channel or whatever, and you're so focused on that, and you start to feel, really you're focused to the degree that you're not spending time masturbating or watching porn or anything like that, and you just completely abstain from it. We have to stop and ask ourselves, is the non-masturbation and non-viewing of pornography and the non-orgasming, is that responsible for it? Or maybe it's the fact that if you're being productive, if you're moving yourself in the right direction towards your goals, if you're focused on self-improvement, if you're going after what you want in life every single day and you're just crystal clear, laser focused on it, maybe that's what makes you feel good. Because I know personally, when I'm reaching my full potential every day, I'm not wasting any time, I feel at my best.
Yeah.
That's when I feel my best. And so it's hard to look at that and say that not touching my dick and masturbating is what caused it, or maybe it's just the fact that I'm focused on the important things in life that give me energy and that make me feel good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chicken and the egg thing there, right? I mean,
right.
Does one give birth to the other or the other way around? Yeah, I feel like it's impossible to tell. I mean, even though there are a lot of accounts of testosterone being increased, and therefore testosterone freely in your bloodstream is able to have you, disengage with distracting behavior and stuff. I do agree that those studies are out there, but I mean, is it the operative factor for the increased productivity? I don't know. But I mean, I will say that there's definitely a sense of benignness to the NoFap movement as opposed to other reactionary online communities. I don't think that they're particularly hurting anybody. I mean, right. Even though there are some positive aspects to the MGTOW movement or something like that, I feel they do kind of foster a mentality that is in more ways than one kind of negative towards women. The NoFap movement, I mean, all they're doing is really just having this weird, cultish brotherhood online, which if that makes them happy, good for them, I guess. But I wouldn't say that keeping a counter of when you masturbate and when you don't is the most productive thing in the world. But I mean, I don't particularly, ascribe to them as some kind of weird toxic community. I think it's just they have a belief, and hey, if you said, it's a more of a cultish thing and it's kind of a more placebo effect kind of thing, then whatever makes you happy, I guess. But I won't be spending my time on that. Hello, you there?
Yeah. Sorry, you cut out again, and it was getting choppy. But
Okay.
looks like it caught up and it's back to normal. It's you might say that it's definitely a touchy subject. You know,
Shut the
one.
fuck up, Anton.
I know. I had to do one more. Anyway, one thing I couldn't help but think when pondering the subject is it seems like there's a natural cap on the number of days that you can even do this, because obviously
Nocturnal
the
emissions,
body,
yeah.
nocturnal emissions, it you know, the body will ejaculate during your sleep, and I feel like that sort of undermines, because you'll see people in the nofap community, they're like, it's been 97 days since I've masturbated. And I'm like, okay, well, how many times did you jizz in your pants when you were asleep during that? And it's like, I feel like that sort of puts a natural cap on how far you can actually push that. And that's one thing that I think is worth pointing out. But then maybe you could argue, like, well, the non-viewing of porn itself and the non-giving into these dopamine triggering urges, that in and of itself could partly be responsible for the benefits we receive. So maybe that's true. And this was interesting. There's the nofap community and there's the semen retention community. They're very similar. There's a lot of crossover. The semen retention community takes it to almost like a spiritual level, though,
I've read some of this shit.
where
It's
they
crazy.
they talk about it like it gives you these almost mystical powers. If only they talk about your chakras and shit like that, like a lot of meditative Eastern Buddhist sort of language, and that's really weird. And I even saw some people who were framing it from like a respect for women perspective, where they're like, semen retention and nofap has turned me into a person who respects women and doesn't view them as sexual objects, and thinks of them as equal partners and not like pieces of meat to use for my gratification. And I saw that, and I'm like, well, I mean, at least that's one good thing that comes from it, you know?
Yeah, it's a good positive, but I mean, like, do you really think the absorption of semen excess into your body is the reason why you now think that women are now worthy of your time and your commitment and stuff? Like, I think it's kind of like the chicken and the egg thing. It's like, I just feel like it boils down to the fact that, like, okay, if you paint a mental landscape for yourself where women are not just there for you to masturbate to or whatever on a screen or even in real life or something like that, I feel like, that's a positive thing. But like, I don't think it's the reabsorption of semen into your bloodstream because it's just chilling in your balls. Like, it's just kind of silly. But like, and I feel like they're conflating a lot of things that I've read about this community is like they're conflating the idea that like there's definitely a hormone spike after a certain number of days of not masturbating for sure. But then they're extrapolating that into like, oh yeah, the protein of like, your semen when it's absorbed into you, like gives you like, much more, muscle fiber rebuilding after you work out. I'm like, that's just general testosterone. That's not like there's some mystical power of your jizz. Like, it's just kind of strange that like they've built, like you said, it's like a religious cult of absorbing semen. Well, I guess good for them, I guess. I have no idea how to respond to that shit.
Yeah, I will say last time I went a long stretch of time without masturbating or having any sort of orgasms or nocturnal emissions or anything like that. It was like a 7 or 8 day period, and I just remember like day 7, day 8, just I was like a fucking hungry dog, where I would just like just like a dog looking for a meal, and I would just like look at anything. It was just like personally when I went a long stretch, I was very distracted. I felt like my standards for attractiveness, I could just like feel them with each passing day dropping further and further. And so personally, I don't know. For me, it's not the sort of thing where it's like masturbating or watching porn is this thing where it just like consumes me and pulls me away from shit.
Yeah.
If anything, it's just like quick stress release, and then it's like boom, back to being able to focus on what I'm doing and so forth. I will also say that in preparation for this podcast, I did experiment with nofap, and today is day 5, and I don't really feel all that different, to be completely honest. Probably the fact that I viewed it as an experiment to like pay attention to how I would feel, and like almost viewed it as a sort of personal challenge so that I could report on it, definitely makes it different from the last time. I don't really feel all that different, I have to say. I just kind of feel like myself right now. So, I mean, day 3 hallucinations did start to set in. No, I'm kidding. It's I don't know. Maybe if I pushed it for longer, like I would feel different. But 5 days in, and I really just feel like myself right now. So that's my personal experience that I have to report to you guys.
All right. Well, Anton will be starting his Reddit thread, and we can all cheer him on. #GoAntonGo for his NoFap experiment.
You know what's funny is how supportive the community is. Like you'll read through the subreddits where people are talking about it. Like I'm on day 8 or whatever, and it's almost like they're treating it as some sort of life-ruining alcohol addiction, where they're like, "Stay strong, brother." It's like a really supportive community, and you know I do respect that they're like helping each other out and encouraging each other and so forth. But I'm like, this is the thing that you want to encourage them to do. It's almost like a misallocation of support and encouragement.
Yeah. And I mean, like, of course, granted, there is the side of the equation where, you know, porn addiction and masturbation addiction is a real thing. But I mean, like,
right.
Like, it's just, I don't know, like having a whole community behind it. I feel, maybe because I haven't really experienced that. Maybe that's why I'm so cavalier about it. But like, maybe, I don't know, just getting better at time management and having, you know, putting it in your mind that fantasy is fantasy, reality is reality, and you should be more productive when you get a chance to be. I feel like that's kind of like the long and short of it. I don't think that, like I said, I mean, there's a certain benignness to the community, of course, because I mean, like other communities on the internet, these are actually like fostering support and like, you know, trying to say, hey man, you know, just stay strong and do whatever you have to do. That's totally great. But I mean, I think that might be just an overreaction to a problem that could be easily avoided by something a little more tepid.
I would agree with that. Before we move on to our last subject, are there any other points you want to make about NoFap, or you want to move on?
I don't know, man. It's been a touchy subject, but I'm really feeling like we have to just, you know, move on because I've just been desperate to get this one out, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Terrible dad joke, so please kill me when you have a chance.
Yeah, we'll get right on that. No. I wanted to... We have talked a little in this podcast about self-improvement, personal development, sort of in tangential ways, but I wanted to focus directly on it. Now, this is something personally I am extremely passionate about. For probably the past, 3 years of my life or so, I've been obsessed with it. I can't even remember how I started. If I had to date it and put it to some sort of event or a period in my life, I'm pretty sure it was when I was sort of frustrated at a lack of success with a relationship that I was trying to materialize with a woman, and I was just feeling really down. And it was also a period of really high anxiety in my life where it was just a period of a couple days where I had really high anxiety and self-consciousness, and I was just deeply uncomfortable around people. And there was a period of probably about 5 years of my life where I had pretty serious social anxiety on and off. Used to be pretty terrified of speaking publicly. Had a couple really horrendous experiences with that and just social interactions and so forth. And I can't even remember the day that I started doing it, but I started one day just watching motivational YouTube videos where I would just start by typing motivation into YouTube, and I would just listen to the videos. And I just got into the habit of doing it every single day and just hearing the stuff they were talking about, hearing, the empowering messages. Hearing people talk about stuff you can become successful, you can achieve your potential, and just all the advice they were hearing. It's my entire life I lived almost without knowing that sort of thing was out there. And I just heard it and I was like, wow, this feels like it's what's been missing from my life. And so I just made it a habit of every single day listening to motivational content, and not just listening, but committing to actually act upon the stuff that I learned, and just gradually over time, over a period of several years, acting upon the advice, the recommendations I got, trial and error, tweaking things, testing things out, seeing what works. I feel like I have just radically transformed myself and my life. So personally, it's something I'm really passionate about, and I could talk about it for 10 hours and I wouldn't even scratch the surface. But I wanted to get your general take on self-improvement. What are some general philosophies you hold to that have been helpful in your own life?
I've had a very, very similar experience to what you just said, for sure. So I definitely agree with almost everything you just said. So I went through a period of being completely kind of down on myself. I was the post part of a relationship, the kind of the larva stage, the butterfly stage. I was kind of stuck in that little disgusting worm stage. And honestly, what I did was, I actually was watching a bunch of I'm big into weightlifting. So I watched a bunch of workout people, and I can't remember the guy that recommended me to do this, but essentially he said when you do your cardio for the day, or you do, you know, some kind of like general meditative, whatever active experience, what you should do is put on your headphones, go for a walk for an hour, listen to an audiobook. And he said like that hour walk is therapeutic and beneficial on so many levels. And what I started doing was I just started listening to things like hyper learning, things like Thinking Fast and Slow, things like you know, general reductionist human philosophy, things about how to actually improve yourself and like, you know, what's happening in your life. And so I just started like literally passively listening to all of this like really interesting, informative, and motivational content. And then it was almost like kind of like osmosis. Like I started internalizing it as I kept listening to it, you know, just on a walk or on a run. And yeah, I was that content definitely has improved my life for sure. I don't need it so much anymore because like I'm definitely a more confident and more energetic and more engaged person now. But I would say that for anybody who is going through a tough time or just maybe even want to just learn, I feel like it's a great way to kind of ground yourself and recenter yourself as a person and make yourself a more well-rounded individual, if it makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. There was one thing near the end there that I would disagree with, although it might just be more the way you formulated it instead of the way you actually think about it. You said something like, well, I'm at the point now where I don't really need this anymore. I feel like it's a lifelong process. No matter what level you're at, there's always a higher level to take it to. And I feel like the minute you become satisfied with yourself and you start to stop doing that mental homework and the self-improvement work on a daily basis, I feel like that's when you're either going to stagnate or even worse, old thinking patterns start to slip in, and then the bad habits start to come in. Because I know personally, if I slip off of it, I'll start to recede. I'll start to fall backwards. Some of those old pernicious thought patterns come back in. And for me, it's like a constant battle. It's like I'm at war with the part of my mind that's negative, that's self-conscious, that's afraid, that brings me down. And for me, it's a daily process. It's a constant struggle. And I feel like no matter what level you're at, you can always take it to the next level. And I think it should be a lifelong process of just continual seeking of knowledge and information that will help you to improve your life.
Oh, no, for sure. I agree with that. But like what I'm saying is when I first started that process, I was listening to more, you know, kind of like the stuff you listen to like bring you out of a dark place, if that makes any sense. And then, you know, now it's like I'm listening to that stuff, you know, more motivational productivity tips, stuff like that. But I'm also just learning things. You know, I listened to what the fuck did I listen to? It was a book, I forgot the name of it, but it was about like learning a new hobby in 50 days and like, you know, mastering it. And I'm not saying that I didn't like necessarily need the motivational content like right now. What I'm saying is I'm of the belief that once you change your thinking, as long as you maintain that form of thinking, you don't need as many external stimuli to keep up that mindset. So you know, if you're someone who's at war with, you know, the more negative or the more didactic parts of your personality, then of course, like, I totally agree that you should be doing that stuff as long as you need it. But for me, like, I was able to internalize the lessons, and it wasn't like I needed someone to pull me back up with a rope out of the well. I was able to change my thought process and thus my mind by, you know, having that kind of immersive period of listening to motivational stuff like that to pull me out of a dark place. But now that I'm out of that place, like, my mindset has changed, my thought process has changed. I'm not like in a place where I'm completely beating up on myself. I am able to pursue the things that I want to learn, but I'm also satisfied with myself internally, like on a personality level. That makes any sense?
Yeah, for sure. That's why I started out by saying it was probably just the way you emphasize it, and not the way you actually think about it. Yeah. I would definitely agree. I think that as you start to level up and certain areas that used to hold you back, once you've sort of mastered that, your focus does shift. And you ratchet more things into your mind and into your daily routine and whatever it is. And your focus definitely does start to shift. Like, if you suck at time management, once you really get that down, then it's like, what are my other weak points? And then you focus on that. And it's sort of like you identify a weakness, you attack it, you turn it into a strength, and then it's like on to the next thing. So, you know, obviously, even with the learning process and the motivational stuff you're listening to, even within there, you don't want to stagnate. Like, I have this one master playlist where I just have like the best of the best content that really resonates with me. I throw it into this playlist I have. It's up to like 160, 70 videos at this point.
Wow.
And even that, since I listen to it so fucking much, a lot of it starts to feel repetitive, and even there I start to feel like I'm stagnating mentally. So I'm constantly looking for new things, identifying weak points, and just focusing on those areas. And that's something that I would definitely recommend as well. What are some like specific habits that you have that you think help to improve your life, like whether on a daily basis, weekly? Like, what are some actual concrete identifiable things that work for you and that you would recommend for others?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that I do is before I start doing any kind of work, obviously I have a lot of different interests. I'm a podcaster. I do weightlifting. I'm a PhD student. I do video essays and video formats and stuff and video editing. The first thing that I do is before I start doing work for the day, I sit at my desk or go for a walk or whatever, and I make a mental checklist of what are the things I want to accomplish today. And I kind of bifurcate it. So there's two lists. So one is like specific tasks, things that I want to get done, and the other one is specific sentiments or feelings that I want to feel today. I want to feel productive. I want to feel satisfied. I want to feel emotionally content. And so I feel like if you set an intention in the beginning of the day for what you want to get done, how you want to feel, and how you want to do it, I feel like that kind of makes your mind a little more receptive to focusing on whatever it is you have to get done. Another thing is I always make a kind of a mental tabulation while I'm doing work of whether I'm focused or not. I have an issue with being distracted and stuff, so I make sure that if I get down a rabbit hole of Googling some stuff and I still have stuff to do, I stop and I think, okay, am I doing something that's productive? No. And then I'll just kind of move it. There are other ways you can do that with timers and such. You can do that. There's a lot of different advice for setting timers for work. That's I think it's pretty good. I've never been able to do that. Never wanted to do that, but that's totally fine as long as you don't mind putting yourself in a kind of a timetable ethos. And the thing I do at the end of the day is I write down things that I am grateful for. I have a gratitude journal on my bedside table, and I feel like for people that are more predisposed to negativity, like I was, it's very, very easy to slip into the path of thinking that everything sucks and nothing's going your way. But if you spend your time right before you end your day thinking about the things that are going your way or the things you are grateful for, it makes you a much less cynical person. I feel like you're able to actually appreciate things that maybe you didn't really think about otherwise. I'll give you an example. I was going through a really, really shitty time in the lab, and not many things are working out well, but I got this kind of a small result, but a important one that I was, trying to get. I was trying to make this compound to characterize. Basically, when you publish in anything with chemistry, especially synthetic chemistry, what you have to do is something called characterization. So you take all these spectra, all these molecules, and you prove that you had it to all the authors and all the reviewers of the paper. So in the middle of all these really, really shitty results, I was able to characterize this compound and everything was beautiful and looked great. And so when I was writing down my journal for that night, I didn't even think about the crappy things that went on in the lab. I thought about, I characterized this. It went well. It was nice. And then just having that small little victory in my brain, I was able to kind of get everything else done, and it worked out really well in the immediate future. So I feel like keeping tabs on where you are in terms of a positive mindset and making sure that you are grateful for the things that you should be grateful for, I think is the best thing you can possibly do. Those are three kind of things that I do. And then more generally, I try to listen to, just general audiobooks and podcasts about that kind of stuff as much as I possibly can. How to deal with a problem. And more pragmatically, I listen to video editing tutorials all the time. I listen to things about human psychology and how to actually recenter yourself and focus on things that really matter to you. So those three specific things with that one kind of general thing kind of peppered in throughout my entire life is kind of what I do. I don't know. How about you?
That's awesome. For me, it's a lot of stuff that I could talk about. Because like I said, I'm just totally fucking obsessed with this. I'll try to only focus on the basics. I did just want to say I love the gratitude journal thing, focusing on things you're grateful for. Because me personally, I know that's something I struggle with, is looking at where I'm at now. Especially, that saying, comparison is the thief of joy. Looking at other people in the space that I work at, like other online stores, other YouTubers, comparing their level of success, their level of subscribers, their level of growth against myself, and it makes me feel like a loser. And there's this quote I think it was Zen Shi who said it, where she said, a flower doesn't focus on competing with the flowers next to it. It just focuses on blooming. It's kind of like a sentimental quote a little bit, but
it's true.
I like that concept of just only focusing on yourself, like competing against yourself, not competing against somebody who has like a 10-year head start against you, but just like competing yourself against who you were yesterday, who you were last year, and trying to reach your full potential. I also really like the part where you don't just write down a task list, because that's like 101, is like, what do I want to get done today? But you actually write down specific feelings that you're looking for. How do I want to feel? I want to feel like a winner. I want to feel productive. I want to feel like a champion. I want to feel like I'm making progress. That I absolutely love, and it's not something that I do, but it's something I might try. Me, personally, there's a lot here, and I'll try to just only focus on like the core things. One of the biggest things for me is continual experimentation and fine-tuning. I think you should there's an old saying I love where it's to improve is to change, but to perfect is to change often. And I think with personal development, that's absolutely essential. Is you try out a new system, you try something else, you move things around, you do this instead of that, try out different systems, find out what gives you the best results, the best feelings, find out what works the best. Because I never feel like I'm finished. I never feel like this is my system and it's what I stick to. Constantly trying new things, constantly listening to the advice of others, and trying out new things. And I'm not gonna talk about the evolution of the systems I've gone through, because that in and of itself would take forever. I'm just gonna talk about sort of where I'm at now and what I do and what's helpful to me. One thing is I collect stuff that's really important to me. I have memos in my phone where I distill like really important insights, observations. Maybe it's some sort of like epiphany I've had that's really helped me out, related to maybe it's time management or facing your fears or being more productive. Maybe it's a quote I heard that I like. Maybe it's something I came up with myself. And I distill, it's not like paragraphs or essays. It's literally like I distill it down to a bullet point, to a sentence. And it's just like really the most important things that help me to improve myself. And I have these phone memos where I just write those down and I review them continuously. It's to the point where I have like 11 memos filled up with it, so I can't read all of that every day. I try to look through one a day, and I try to actually like process what it is, and that way I'm just like continually cementing those things into my mind, and it really does just totally rewire the way that you think. Because if you have a good idea and you don't write it down, you don't consult it again, it's like the wind almost. It's like smoke. You know, if you have a good idea and you don't actually put pen to paper or write it down somewhere, the chance of you remembering it, making it a part of your mindset going forward, and cementing it into who you are very quickly turns to almost zero after a day or two. Yep. So that's very important for me, is writing those things down and consulting them on a repeated basis. That's an important part of my daily activities. Another thing is the importance of prioritizing. Understanding what it is that you want to do, what are your absolute most important activities. Brian Tracy, he's probably one of my favorite people in this space. He's really good on time management, personal effectiveness, business insights and so forth. He talks about how you should write down all the things you want to get done and rank them in order of priority. So the most important thing for me on a daily basis, without a doubt, is doing the YouTube work to grow my channel. And currently, since I just started this online store, is working on that to get a good product line established and set that up and try to scale that up, turn it into a business. Those are my most important things. So what I do on a daily basis is the first thing in the morning that I do is that. I don't wake up and watch the fucking television. I don't read the fucking newspaper. I don't work out first thing in the morning. The first thing I do is the most important task. I wake up, I have some coffee, get myself in the fucking zone, and I start and I work uninterrupted on that until I do the amount of work that I set out to do for that day, which on days that I work at the day job is 4 hours. On days I don't, I try to do like 10 or more hours. If you do it first thing in the morning, when you're fresh, when you have the most energy, then that gets done, and whatever happens from that point on, you could have a terrible day at work. Things could go south. You got the most important thing done for the day. So even if the rest of the day sucks, you can still look back and be like, well, at least I got that done. That's very important for me, is organizing my day and task list in order of priority like that. Another thing for me is working out every single day. I mean, literally every single day. For me, it's up to like 470 days in a row or something. I track this shit. Now, when I say that, I don't mean you do the same workout every day. I'm not doing fucking bicep curls every day. That'd be stupid. You need to let the muscle groups rest. So I'll focus on one area one day, I'll do something else another, like bicep curls one day, then I'll do forearms the next, then maybe squats the next day, then maybe abs. But consistently doing it every single day, keeping track of it, setting up a streak like that for me makes me feel really good personally, knowing that I can do something every single day. Never giving into any excuse I have. If, I work out at home, so if I'm sick, I can still work out here. If I'm tired, I don't care. I find a way to do it. I never give in to any excuse. If I have some sort of injury, I find a workout that I can work around it. Not accepting those excuses and always finding a way to get it done, that makes you feel really good at an individual level, and that I think is also really important. I realize I've been going on for a while here. I'll try to just say a couple more things, and then I'll shut up and hand it off to you. Another thing for me, very important, is using transitional time valuably. So, transitional time, I mean when you're like loading the dishwasher or preparing your lunch or driving to work or something like that. Don't just listen to the fucking radio. Don't just stare out the windshield. Turn on something educational, whether it's a podcast or an audiobook or something motivational. Listen to that, use that time productively, and you'd be amazed how much you can learn during that time. And I also level it up and I increase the speed. So podcasts I listen to, gradually I've increased the speed to where now I'm at like 2.7 times speed. So I'm just fucking like getting flooded with information. And in the amount of time that a person listens to one podcast, I've listened to 2.5 podcasts. And I feel like I can retain the information well at that speed. That helps me. One other thing is the importance of reading actual books. Because like articles, a lot of articles are, pretty superficial. 400 words, low effort, crank it out fast so we can publish it. Books are where you're going to get the best information, the most concrete information, the most thorough information. So I try to read at least one book a week, and there are really two ways that I would recommend doing this. One would be to simply set aside a chunk of time each day to do, or you can just set aside one single day where you do nothing else but read, and the remaining 6 days, you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to focus on it, and then you can focus on your business, your job. Set up some sort of system where you're reading one book a week or more, and you'd be amazed at how much you learn and level up in life. And though those are the core things that I do, I realize I just threw a lot on the table, but like I said, it's something I'm very energetic and excited about, and those are some of the key things that I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, number one, like, I think it's really admirable that you try to go for a book a week. That's really, really great. Because, that's one thing for me. It's like, even though I'm okay at time management, I definitely don't have enough time to read one book a week. So that kind of sucks. But, yeah, no, I love the fact that you do that. And I also like, something that actually you actually put a name on, but I just kind of do naturally. But that's a really good point. Transitional time being used effectively. So, like, when you're doing laundry, folding laundry, put on a podcast or, put on something educational and speed it up so you can like intake more information. I do that all the time. So, yeah, it's good to hear that people are doing the same things that I do. And also I think just generally, I mean, it's really admirable the way that, you're always striving to be better. You never really get like stagnant or complacent, or at least you try not to be complacent or stagnant. And it kind of reminds me. So, I mean, as the inner film nerd, Matthew McConaughey, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so he did an Oscar speech when he won for Best Actor in 2014.
I already know the quote.
It's so good. I already know the quote. It's like, I'm never going to be my hero, but it's okay. I'm going to keep on chasing it. And I feel like that's a great way to look at life because, I mean, your best is not really something you ever really actually achieve. It's something that you're in the pursuit of getting. And even if you don't get to your mental landscape of your quote-unquote best, you're still creating something merely amazing along the way. And that's almost just as good because even if it's not at your best, that thing is a product of you trying to one-up yourself. And I feel like that's the best way to look at life because, if you have a goal and you attain it and then you get there, then, I mean, what are you doing? Like, are you going to stop living your life? No, of course not. Like, you want to keep whatever the standpoint is a couple years ahead of you to where you want to get to. I feel like that, that's just like the way that I think like everyone should view life, where it's like you never really get your best, you pursue your best, and you create something amazing along the way.
For sure. Yeah, not trying to like one up you or correct you on this or anything, but because I've heard that quote so many times in the different videos I've heard, I can almost recite it word for word.
So can I. I was paraphrasing, but yeah, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So basically the way the quote goes is he's like, I had a very important person come to me in my life when I was about 15 years old, and they said, who's your hero? And he said, I don't know. I'm going to have to come think about that. Come back to me in 2 weeks. And the person came back to me, and they said, who's your hero? And he's like, you know who it is? It's me 10 years from now. And he's like, that's who I'm always chasing as my hero. That idea I love is like looking towards the future and being like, what if I could become the person that I most want to look up to? I really enjoy that quote.
Yeah.
Regarding, my apparent obsession with improvement and always trying to get better. That's definitely something that I pride myself on, is really in all areas, always trying to find that next level, always trying to find a way to level up. It doesn't matter what it is. Like in terms of YouTube videos, every single aspect of it, I'm trying to find ways to get better. You know, how can I improve the sound effects? How can I improve the joke writing? How can I upskill in terms of the video editing? You know, every single part of it, the research, the writing, the stock photo library and videos I have, like every single possible part of it, I want to do it better. I want to find a way to step it up and improve, and it's something that almost consumes me. And this is something you hear a lot in the motivational community, like CT Fletcher. He does a lot of weightlifting advice. Yep. He talks about how to become great at something, you have to be obsessed. You have to be completely consumed by it. And the moment you become satisfied with where you're at, gets back to what I was saying earlier. That's when you stagnate. That's when you stop looking to get better. And I think continually finding ways to get better, and not just asking yourself, like, how can I get better, and brainstorming about it. That in and of itself is valuable, but actively going out and actually learning about these things, you know, buying books on comedy writing, for example, so that I can get better at writing jokes in my videos. Like, I remember some of my early videos, people were saying, like, your jokes fucking suck in your videos. And instead of being like, oh, I'm a fucking loser, people don't think I was funny, I was like, you know what, motherfucker, I'm gonna read so many goddamn books on joke writing, and I'm gonna get so good at delivering the jokes and so forth, that no one's gonna fucking say that. And just taking those weak points, taking those areas of criticism where you're not as good as you could be, and instead of giving up or accepting that you suck or there's like some natural ceiling, you know, buying books, watching videos, reading articles, trying to find ways to get better in that space. That's something that I would highly recommend people do, because it makes you feel really good about yourself to be constantly making progress and getting better.
Yeah, and also I feel like what you said, we can also be kind of reductionist and say that I feel like with your mind state, if I were to boil it down to two kind of poles, there's avoiding failure and seeking success. And I feel like everything that you do is you use any kind of negativity to seek success, as opposed to, oh, I want to do this so I don't like suck. No, you want to do it because your mind state is, I genuinely want to get better at whatever it is I want to do. And I feel like people that, you know, take those comments kind of in a place that it's a personal attack on yourself. I feel like you should always view those things as, you know what, if you don't like that, I'm going to get really good at it and I'm going to prove you wrong. And I feel like being able to use that stuff as fuel to see success is a lot better in life than, you know, doing everything assiduously avoiding failure.
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely try my hardest to use anything negative as fuel in some sort of way. If I have some sort of terrible experience, like I embarrass myself or I humiliate myself or, you know, something goes poorly in some way, it's really important to actually stop, think about it, process it, ask questions like, what did I do wrong? How can I improve next time around? What can I learn from this to improve going forward? And just stopping to do that really helps you to have a lot of important insights that you're not going to have if you just have a shitty experience and you try to drown the sorrows away with alcohol or whatever, and you just like you don't do that self-improvement homework of stopping to actually reflect after something bad happens. And just using that negativity as fuel, I think, can be very powerful. Like, I literally have comments saved and screenshotted where people are like, your videos are too mediocre, your channel's never gonna get big and stuff like that. I literally save comments like that so I can look at it, and I can just use it so I can look at it, and I'm like, yeah, bitch, we'll see about that. And I'm like, I can't wait to prove you wrong. Just finding ways to take that negative stuff and use it to push you forward. It can be really powerful if you do it the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do a similar thing. I mean, I'm not as gracious towards my negative commenters, because usually for video essayists, they're pretentious assholes. I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. So typically I'll prove them wrong with like giving them a source or something like that in the comments. But I do agree that like using those comments as kind of fuel for like, okay, motherfucker. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, sweet. Let's go. I'll prove you wrong. I feel like that's the best way to look at those kind of things. So I agree with that.
Yeah, David Goggins is probably the master of using negativity
David Goggins,
as fuel.
dude, he's an insane person, man. Holy shit,
he's a beast. I love that guy. He talks about how like when he was running a 100-mile marathon, and it was like the first time he'd ran in years, and he was just getting destroyed. He talks about how he just like went inside of his mind, and he was just taking everything negative from his life and just finding a way to use it to like push him forward. I totally love that. And he had a quote. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, so I might get it wrong, but he basically said, when you can find power and fuel in your insecurities, you become very unstoppable.
Yep, 100%. Because like you can either be held down by your insecurities, or you can use that as fuel to get away from them. And that's the best way to look at it. Like if you're insecure about your weight, for example, or you're insecure about, something about your personality, instead of like accepting it as, this is like who I am and I have to just, accept it and move on. No, like if it's something that's like genuinely biologically based, then you can't change that. But if it's something that is a physical trait, a characteristic, a personality trait, then change it. Like, and the only thing that's really stopping you from doing that is yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, so looking at the time here, we've been going for about like an hour and 15 minutes or so. I'd be happy to go for about 2 hours or so. So you cool to just keep going?
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Just wanted to make sure. So, another part of self-improvement that I think is very important. Another thing that I'm very passionate about is the importance of facing your fears and overcoming them. Mm-hmm. And that's something else I wanted to talk about. Personally, this is something I have struggled with a lot in life in terms of social anxiety, in terms of public speaking anxiety, even something like this. Like to this day, I still get anxious before I'm doing like some sort of live recording or podcast or something like that. And for me, it's a continual process of just improving your mind, finding ways to flip it around. And what are some of the mechanisms that you personally use to help you face and overcome your fears? And just what are your general thoughts about this area?
It's interesting. So, I mean, to like the anxious about recording and public speaking and stuff, I've actually never had that because, fun fact, I used to act. When I was a little kid, I actually had an agent. I was auditioning for stuff like in California and New York and stuff. So I've never had a fear about, being in front of people and speaking and stuff. That's just something that I find pretty natural, which is nice. But my biggest fear, honestly, is abandonment. That's been my biggest fear. And so I feel like the best way to like get through things that either scare you, give you anxiety, is to first don't deny that you have a fear, admit that you have it. Like it's almost like, Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever. It's like the first step of solving a problem is admitting that you have one. And even though it's kind of cliche, it's 100% true. Like I have a fear of abandonment. And so because I'm able to actually admit that to myself, that puts me in the state of, okay, I'm not just accepting my fear. I'm seeing what can I do to actually combat that, or why do I have this fear? So first, admitting that you have the fear and admitting that you're scared shitless of it is the first thing you have to do. And the second thing is, I mean, there are some things that, you can't really, embrace unless it actually happens to you, like something like abandonment. But, putting yourself in like a mental state, I saw a life coach when I was a little kid because I had like pretty severe depression. And so this person said, Johnny, what's your biggest fear? And I was talking, kind of beating on the bush, and they said, okay, it's probably abandonment. So imagine if all your friends went away tomorrow, what would happen? And then I was like, and they said, okay, imagine your family all dies tomorrow. What happens? And then I was like, and so this person would, kind of feed me things like slowly taking away pieces of my life. And then when you get down to it at a more reductionist level, all you have is yourself and your reputation, and you have to find ways to bolster that as much as possible. And, even though it's kind of an abstract fear that I have, doing that kind of mental checklist and that mental cataloging was able to, kind of make me into a person that can actually be okay with the thought of abandonment, because I know that I still have myself at the end of the day. I still have my personality, and I still have a lot to give people. So that was something that would really help me out. But generally, I mean, once you know that you have a fear and you admit that you have the fear, I think just thinking about, what would happen to you in your mind if you were confronted with that fear. And it could be something like arachnophobia, or it could be something abstract like, dying alone or something like that. Like, you have to be able to occupy the mind state of actually confronting your fears. And then once you, and this is kind of, going even further than that, but point 3 is, if you confront your fears in your mind, maybe not even real life, but in your mind, maybe you can see that they're not really that much to be afraid of. And maybe you're able to face those fears. And, if you face it again, you're more adapt to it, because you can actually, recall the fact that you actually were able to occupy the mind space to confront that fear. And then once you do that, maybe you realize that it's not something to be really afraid of. It's just a natural part of life.
I really love the part about not denying the fear and accepting that you have it as the essential starting point, because I know personally from my own life how true that is. When I used to have pretty bad social anxiety, I had some sort of weird mental block that prevented me from acknowledging it and accepting it. I would deny it. I would say things like, "Oh, I don't give a fuck. Fuck these people. Duh." I would just, I had these weird blocks where I would not acknowledge the truth of it, because I guess acknowledging it would have been painful. It would be me admitting that I have some sort of flaw that I need to work on. And really, I would just kind of drown it away with alcohol. Like social situations, I would depend on alcohol to make me confident and more comfortable around people, and I did a lot of drinking at this time socially. And it wasn't until I accepted that there was a problem with anxiety that things actually began to change for me. Because that's when I started realizing, like, no, I have to actually confront the fear head on. I have to actually go into these situations that make me uncomfortable, and confront the fear and feel it, but do the thing anyway. And then gradually your comfort zone starts to expand. And it wasn't until I took that essential first step that I did start to see improvements. Same thing with public speaking. Like, I started doing Toastmasters public speaking practice probably about like 2 years ago at this point, something like that. And I remember I was clear about what I wanted to do with my life in terms of growing the YouTube channel, eventually expanding to, podcasting and debating and public speaking in front of audiences and public debates. And I just realized, like, well, since I have this fear of public speaking, what am I waiting for? Like, I have to start preparing for it now. Yeah. And so I made the decision to go and start doing Toastmasters meetings to get that practice. And it was horrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. The first meeting I went to, I was so flooded with like fear and anxiety that I was like shaking. But I showed up, I prepared some stuff to say, and I said it. And after you do it, after you actually confront the fear and face it, it's like this wave washes over you. I don't know why I'm holding a napkin as I'm talking, but it's for dramatic emphasis. I don't know. I'm tactile. I like to grab things and hold them as I talk. Anyway, this wave washes over you where immediately after you face the fear, it's like it disappears and you realize all this time, this is what's been holding me back. You actually have a good time. You show up, you do the thing, you give the speech, and you do it without using the crutch of alcohol or drugs or whatever it is. And you realize, like, after you do it, all this time I've been running away from something that's actually quite enjoyable. And then through that process of facing the fear and actually putting yourself in the situation that scares you, your comfort zone really does start to expand. It's not just like a cute phrase that people use. That's actually the process that happens. You become comfortable in more situations. And for me, I'm at the point where I can give a speech now, and, like, I have a great fucking time. Like, I still feel physiologically the anxiety beforehand, but through that process of confronting the fear and doing all the mental homework that I do, I'm at a point where I sort of frame it from not the perspective that I used to, where in the past I would feel anxiety, and I would view myself as like, oh, I'm such a loser, no one else feels this way, what kind of fucking douchebag feels anxiety before a speech? People are going to see that I'm nervous and they're going to laugh at me and so forth. That's the way I used to think about it. Now, through actually doing it, I've understood that it's totally natural to feel this way in these situations for a lot of people, and I think about it more as like positive, optimistic excitement, where I'm like, nah, this is energy, this is excitement, this is my body preparing me to go and do my best. And through having so many positive experiences doing it, you start to feel those feelings, and you don't associate it with the negative. You associate it with excitement, fun, passion, talking about stuff that energizes you. And just facing the fear head on, for me, has been one of the most important things.
Yep, I totally agree. Yeah, and nothing really to add, because we've had kind of a similar experience where if, like, obviously, like, yours is a more tangible fear than mine is, but, like, if you're able to put yourself in the state where you're able to actually accept that you have the fear and also, like, think about, what actually happens physiologically and emotionally with you when you're actually encountered with that fear, then you're able to move on from it and think that it's not really that scary. Like, and even if you encounter it again in real life in a more, I guess, bombastic situation, you're already primed to handle it because you've already more or less confronted it in your mind. So, yeah.
Yeah, the one actionable thing that I would recommend people can actually do themselves that will help transform the way they feel, like, before I was anxious, now I feel good. If there's one thing that's like a magic bullet in terms of anxiety, whether it's a job interview or first date or speech, I recommend giving yourself really passionate, out loud pep talks beforehand. Like when I'm driving to go give a speech, number one, it helps to just practice the speech a few times. Not necessarily word for word memorization, because I think, spontaneity and just having like general points to hit, but sounding more natural is better for speaking. Practicing beforehand is one thing that's very helpful because your mind is a lot more comfortable in the moment because you're like, we've been here before. That helps me personally. To actually change the way that you feel inside of yourself, to feel much more confident and powerful, on the drive over, beforehand at your home or whatever, just get yourself pumped the fuck up. Give yourself this really intense motivational speech where you're just talking about how fucking great you are, how you're going to kill it. I remember the last job interview I went to. I was doing this where I was really fucking nervous about it, and I just get on the drive over there. I was just talking about how like I'm gonna do such a fucking good job that this guy's gonna go home after the job interview and tell his wife about it, how fucking amazing this kid was at the job interview, and he'll be like, man, this motherfucker killed it. That was the best goddamn job interview I've ever heard. And you just amp it up and you get excited and you start to talk and have a lot of force and energy with it. And if you just do that for a couple minutes, you're gonna feel like a completely different person afterwards. So if there's one thing that like actually can change the way that you feel before something like that, it's going to feel weird the first few times you do it. Trust me, this works, and I would highly recommend it.
I totally agree. Yeah, like I used to do that actually like before I started writing like videos and stuff because even though I'm pretty decent at writing because like I've been writing since I was a little kid, I still when I put pen to paper, so to speak, and when I say pen to paper, I mean like once my script is done, I start video editing. I want to make sure that like what I make actually reflects, number one, a good emotional sentiment and an intellectual sentiment that people can actually admire or relate to or agree with or whatever. But number two, I want to make sure that I sound the best that I possibly can and do the best that I possibly can. And so what I would do is like before starting a massive edit, like it's kind of similar in your sense, not like the out loud pep talk, but like I set an intention for what I'm about to make. I'm like, how do I want this thing to look? And I paint the most vivid mental picture, and sometimes I'll even sketch some things out on paper, exactly how I want things to look. And so, like you said, like externalizing that internal desire is the best thing you could possibly do, because then it just becomes a matter of just fulfilling what you've already set out the intention to do, as opposed to, just going into something with your dick hanging out and like not really knowing what the fuck's going on.
Definitely. Yeah, there's also a couple quotes I like on fear that personally really help me to reframe it and think about it differently. Like I said earlier, one issue I used to have from an anxiety perspective is viewing the fear as some sort of like dirty, shameful, undesirable thing. And a couple quotes really helped me to understand how illogical that is. And one is the quote, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." I love that quote because it tells you like, no, you're going to be afraid while you do it, but you push past the fear and you do it anyway. You don't let it stop you. Another one is this is sort of a paraphrase. I think it was Mark Twain, Nelson Mandela. A few people have said something similar to this, where they say, courage is not the absence of fear, but it's taking action in spite of it.
Exactly.
That's something I like to remind myself of, where it's like, courage, feeling afraid is natural, but it's what you do to act despite those feelings. It's not how can I put myself in a position where I'm totally fear-free. I don't want to live a fear-free life. Fear is a sign that you're doing bold, exciting shit. If you're afraid about something, it probably means it's important. It probably means there are consequences if it goes poorly, but also massive rewards if it goes right. Fear, move in the direction of your fears. Go towards them because that's where all the best things in life are actually at, is on the other side of it. So don't use fear as something to run away from and shy away from. But wherever you see fear, be like, I want to move in that direction and charge towards it. And that really helps to frame it differently in your mind, I think.
I totally agree. Like, and I like the point you bring up where it's like, fear is never something you actually really get rid of. I mean, like, I'll have that fear of abandonment for the rest of my life, but that's not really the point. I'm not supposed to like convince myself that I don't have a fear. It's how to actually work through it and what to actually do when you're faced with something like that, and like what to do when you're overcome with like your fear, right? I mean, you never really actually eliminate fears. All you know how to do is respond to them and adapt accordingly.
Switching gears a little bit, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people make in life where, you see people who aren't where they want to be, whether in terms of their personality, the way that they feel, their level of success? What are some of the main things you think trip people up, and what could they do to correct those mistakes?
It's interesting. So I would say that like probably the biggest mistake that I would attest to is, I'm going to view it from a positive sentiment and also a negative sentiment. A negative sentiment for someone would be if they're not where they want to be, they get entrenched in this idea that this state is permanent and like, okay, I have to settle for whatever is happening for me right now. And my fix for that is have a bullet point, which I have on my gratitude journal, and it says never settle. Like, that's like, that's how I live my life, right? I never want to actually be complacent with what I want. And so, if you take someone who's like viewing something negatively in their life, like, okay, I'm such an asshole, my fucking apartment sucks, my girlfriend sucks, my job sucks, or whatever. If you settle for that and like you say, okay, this is what happened to me and I accept it, then what are you doing? You're cheating yourself out of true happiness because you're convinced that this is all there really is. And so on a more positive sentiment, let's say someone is like, having a great job and loves everything about their life, and then they can get complacent. And so even if they're happy, like, if you never really strive beyond your best, you never find true happiness. And I feel like if you, in both cases, I guess the thing to fix it is have that mentality in your mind, never settle. Because, even if like you are objectively happy or objectively sad, things can always be better as long as your mind state allows for that.
Yeah, love it. I think personally, just looking at both myself and also other people in life who just aren't where they want to be, one of the biggest mistakes I see is making excuses. Constantly making excuses for why you're not doing what you want to do, why you're not where you want to be, why you haven't started yet, why things aren't the way that you want them. Whether it's in terms of, like a personal development standpoint, like exercising. Oh, I work so much, I'm tired. I'm tired. I worked all day. I don't have time to work out. Like, I'm tired too sometimes, and I still work out, Making excuses for why you're not doing the things you need to do is one of the biggest things I see in terms of relationships, maybe. Oh, my relationships keep not working out because the other people suck. There are no good men out there. Maybe you've had bad luck, or maybe you're also doing things that you're not taking responsibility for, and you're not asking, what am I doing wrong? Do I have some responsibility for the way things are doing in terms of career, in terms of the level of success, where, my YouTube channel, I could sit here and say things like, oh, the YouTube algorithm is against me, and, it's the website's fault, and it's, their policies that are the problem. Or I could take personal responsibility and be like, you know what, I just need to keep leveling up, keep getting better, keep cranking out more content, and it's going to get better. It does not matter what the area is. Find a person that's making excuses, and it's probably one of the key things that's holding them back. Another important one I see is distractions. People may know what it is that they want to do in their life, but if you actually audit their life and look at the way they're spending their time, they're spending 4 hours a day on social media. They're checking every fucking site 15 times a day. They're caught up on everyone's Snapchat feeds. They know all the latest happenings on Facebook, Instagram, every fucking social media site. They're on there. They're there every single day, and they're not actually using their time effectively. That's another one. So it could be other things like video games or shit like that. These time drains that are designed to be addicting and pull you in. That's another big one I see. In a similar vein, poor time management, I think, is another one. Just generally not understanding what your priorities are. Brian Tracy, he has a really good time management lecture on YouTube. I'd highly recommend people look it up. He talks about how what people who are struggling, what people who aren't where they want to be, one thing that they often do when you actually study their to-do list and how they structure their day is what they do is they'll make the list, but they start on the trivial things. They'll work on the meaningless tasks that contribute very little to their life. They'll declutter the apartments. They'll read the newspaper. They'll do all the little things, but the big important things like working on this business project or, putting out the next video, doing the things that really matter, that they put off towards the end of the day. And then by the end of the day, they've gotten very little of substance done. And the last thing I'll mention here is another one I see is lack of clarity. People just having some vague notion of like, I want to be happy. I want to get rich. Yep. I want to be a millionaire. And it's like, what is your plan to get there? What's the vision you have of what you're going to do to actually get to where you want to get to? Like, what are the action steps you're taking right now? And I don't know. I just want to get rich one day. I mean, you can sit around and dream about it and say, like, wouldn't that be nice? But if you don't have clarity about what you want to do and how you want to get there, it's really just a pipe dream.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, I think the most important point you brought up there is the clarity point, because, like, people, like you said, they'll have, like, a really vague notion of, like, what they want to do. It's like, okay, I want to, I want to love my job. Okay, well, that requires a lot of leading questions. What don't you like about the job that you're currently in? What's your favorite hobby? What makes you happy to do that you wouldn't even consider at work if you're doing that? So I feel like having a clear intention with your life is like the most important thing. Like, and, to bring back to the McConaughey quote, I think about, what I want to feel like 5 years from now. Like, what do I want to know? Who do I want to know? What do I want to forget? What do I want to fucking internalize and bring with me? Where do I want to be in life in terms of my relationship or my job or anything? what I want to have accomplished in those 5 years. How am I going to feel when I'm at the end of the 5 years? Putting yourself a few years ahead and thinking about how exactly you want to feel, and then because of that, making a mental image in your mind and making a vision. It like again, like we said, like externalizing that internal desire is the most important thing. If you project a goal out into the universe, chances are it's going to be spit right back at you as long as you keep that goal consistent.
Yeah, for sure. What are your strategies with navigating and dealing with negative, toxic people? Because, whether we're talking about the world of work, maybe it's a colleague you have to put up with, something like that nature, inevitably there are going to be people who, the people who it just seems like there's a black cloud over their head. They come into work, they always have a bad attitude. Every interaction with them feels uncomfortable. There are even some people where they can be in the same room with me, not even saying anything, not even looking at me, minding their own business, but their very presence just makes me feel uncomfortable because you can just, in their body language, in the way they communicate, in their facial expressions, you can just see the negativity inside of them. And what are some of the strategies that you found that help you to navigate that, whether, interpersonally or communication wise? What works for you in that area?
That's a good question. So number one, I mean, like there is the acceptance that like, you can never be responsible for other people's behavior. You're only responsible for the way that you react to it. Like, I think that's like one of the most important things for life. You should never take anything personally in the sense that people aren't reacting a certain way because of you, unless there's a very certain set of circumstances. But one thing is, people are responsible for their own behavior. You're not responsible for their behavior. All that you're responsible for is the way that you react to it. So, number one, like accepting that fact that like, even if you want people to be upset or want people to be happy or whatever emotion you want them to feel, they're never going to cater to exactly how you want them to. All you can do is really react to their emotion. That's number one. Number two, I mean, I feel like you should bifurcate it, right? So, if there are people that you have to necessarily interact with, like for example in work, if you have a colleague or like, a partner who's like, doing something that you don't really like and you have to work on a project together and like you're totally fucked if you don't get this thing done. I mean, there are people that like, you have to be straight up with and you have to be able to address either their behavior or the way they're acting head on, and then try and figure out either a way for them to change their behavior or a way to coexist without too much, tumultuous shit happening. So yeah, conflict resolution and confrontation is definitely key. And then 3, beyond that, like if none of that stuff works and the confrontation, the actual communication side of things doesn't work, then there really is only one thing you can do. You do your best with the confrontations that you do have, and then after that, you let them not live in your mind rent free. Like never let someone live in your mind rent free. Otherwise, you will be as miserable and as detached and as complacent as they are. And that's not a way to go through life. The best example is there was someone I was working with in undergrad in my lab, and this person was a complete, just the most condescending person, and unfoundedly so. This person was not very intelligent and would always comment on other people's work and make them and put them down. And I had to, bring it up to this person. I said, like, look, like everything you say is completely just unfounded and it's really affecting other people in this lab. And this person was like, I don't care, and walked away. And so
wow,
seriously, like it was almost stunning. And so then I had to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to minimize my interactions with this person as much as I possibly can. Obviously, I can't minimize it completely. So I have to just not fake it till I make it, but I have to be able to compartmentalize how I feel about this person and what I need to get done. And so if you compartmentalize those 2 aspects of your interactions with this person, you'll be a lot better for it, because you should not attach your personal happiness to their misgivings. And that's just a huge mistake people make with those kind of people. So those are kind of my 3 things.
I totally agree. Honestly, what I found is the best strategy, at least when you're talking about someone who's like irredeemably negative to the point where like you talking to them clearly isn't
makes you
cutting
upset,
it,
yeah,
and is not going to change it. If someone's that negative and that toxic, avoid at all costs. If possible, cut them out of your life. Block the fucking phone number if you can. Stop spending time with them if possible. If it's a work colleague or somebody where there's forced associations, just avoid them as much as you fucking can. Limit your interactions. Maybe it can be helpful to sort of try to sympathize with that person. I know personally that's something like reframing it in my head to where instead of thinking like, God, I can't fucking stand being around this person, Instead, if I think about it from the perspective of like, man, this person's life really must suck, and he's like, he clearly doesn't enjoy his life, or she's really not happy with the way things are going. And viewing it from a perspective of sympathy rather than hatred and annoyance can help you, at least when you're around them, to feel more positive internally. Because instead of just dreading their presence, you're more just like almost feeling bad for them. Something else personally that it's definitely at least going to make your interactions better is meet the negativity with ruthless positivity. If someone has a bad attitude, try to flip it around in some sort of positive way. Try to always maintain a good attitude. Don't feed into that negativity, because it's just going to spiral and make it worse, and they'll view you as some sort of confidant rather, where they can come and they can spew their negativity onto you, and you guys can gossip together and talk bad and complain. Don't be that person. Don't be that emotional first aid station for them, and instead just whatever negativity they bring to you, don't match it, but try to meet it with positivity. And personally, that has helped. And the last thing for me is just use them as fuel. Use that person, in whatever way you can. Sometimes I'll think back to like people I used to work with at previous jobs who were just horrendous, toxic, horrible people who were just unfucking bearable to be around.
Yeah.
Horrible personalities, horrible nasty attitude, black cloud around them when they walked around. And sometimes I'll just think back to them and I'll imagine them like calling me a loser, or saying like, you're not going to be able to get this done, you can't do it, whether it's like I'm going for a run or something, or working on a project. And I'll just like use them as fuel in some way, or just look at them and think like, I'll audit what I'm doing in the moment, and I'm like, well, this person who's a complete fucking toxic loser does that same thing. Like, this person watches all the Netflix shows, I'm gonna make sure not to watch all the Netflix shows. Look at what they do and use them almost as reverse role models. Like, whatever they do, I'm gonna do the opposite. Those are the core things that help me out.
Yeah. Well, I may take issue with a little bit of what you said, because, like, I mean, there are some things that are universal across everyone, so you can't really avoid doing certain things. Like, I mean, let's say, I don't know, your favorite movie is The Godfather, and you find out their favorite movie is The Godfather. I mean, you're not going to change your favorite movie or something like that, right? Like, like there's a certain acceptance that, like, people that are completely didactically opposed to you do some of the same similar things. But I feel like I
was talking more about general habit patterns there.
Of course, yeah.
Like,
I was just saying, like, generally there are some things that are universal across pretty much everyone. But I would say that, like, also, that also proves the point of the fact that everything is relative, and that also just further proves the point that you can't control people's behavior. Like, you have to just be able to think about how you can react to them to make the situation at least bearable. And then if you can't, like you said, don't let them live rent-free in your brain. Just, try and limit reacting as much as possible, and then get the fuck out of there.
I left my last job before my current one because it was unbearable. The people I worked with, there were several people that were just completely toxic.
What did you do?
Garbage.
What'd you do, by the way?
I'd rather not say, because I don't want to be like publicly
Got it.
smearing certain people, or
Got it.
I'm sure they know who they are, but I don't want to name names or identify anyone.
Sure.
I don't know, out of like professional courtesy, I guess. But
yeah, sure.
The job itself I really enjoyed. The work I was doing I really enjoyed, but the people, not everyone there, to be clear. There were a few key people, I'd say about 2 or 3, where they were just so toxic and unbearable that I tried confrontation. I tried bringing the things up and communicating with them, and when it became clear that didn't work and actually made things much worse, because it turned like this little negative cloud into like this huge, tumultuous, powerful storm of negativity, where it just made things so much worse around them. It got to the point where I was like, I just have to leave this fucking job. And that's what I did. And I got a better job that pays better and has better benefits, so those people can all go fuck themselves, is what I have to say about that.
Good stuff.
So confront where possible, because it's not like there are 2 categories, positive and negative. It's not like everyone is irredeemably negative. Some people, it's a spectrum, and some people, they're not like so irredeemably horrible that it's like you can't do anything about it. And try to talk about it where possible and so forth, and try to navigate around it. But if it's so bad that your mental health is suffering, like mine was, where like you fucking hate going into work, and like you can't stand being around the people because they're just making your life miserable, even outside of work, it's so bad that you're just thinking about it and stressing about it, develop an exit strategy. Get the fuck out of there. Like, why live a life where you're stuck around people like that you don't enjoy being around?
I totally agree. Yeah. there's a saying that my parents always said to me: "What's for you won't go by you, and what is not for you should pass by you." So that basically means like things that are meant for you and things that are meant to make you happy. Like if they truly are for you, once they come into your life, it's very unlikely that they'll leave. And things that don't serve you or shouldn't be for you, literally let them pass over your life and don't let them even have a lasting impression if possible, because I mean all that's going to do is foster negativity and resentment at the end of the day. So you have to be able to think about what it is that you want, and if the situation or the people or the job or whatever is not allowing you to get that, then wash your hands.
Exactly. Final question I want to ask is, what's some really common self-improvement advice that you think is terrible advice?
Man, that's a lot of bad advice. I think that's a really good question. Fuck. Number one, I think that turning to Jesus immediately is probably pretty bad. But but I mean, like, hey, like people use religion as like, you know, kind of a springboard for a lot of personal development things, and if they do, that's great. I think that a lot of people, especially in the therapeutic space, not clinically, of course, but like there are some people that like will attribute a lot of the misgivings in their life to other people that are external to themselves. And I feel like that's probably the worst thing you could possibly do, because like I said, you cannot control other people's behavior. You cannot control their interactions or yours with them for even further than that. All you can control is your own personal reaction to things. And if you view things as, okay, why does this person make me upset? Then it becomes a lot more myopic and a lot more disingenuous, because all you're really doing is you are evaluating others' problems, not your own. And I feel like you have to be able to put on the hat of course, recognizing the shortcomings of people around you, but also you have to think about how you react, and like, is there a way that maybe you could modulate your behavior as opposed to just putting all the negativity off on another person. I feel like that's kind of a common mistake. And then like going further than that, if you grow up thinking that, you know, the other person is always to blame for all of your problems, then what are you going to do when you get married and you have an argument with your spouse and you're completely wrong? Are you going to stridently believe that you are the correct one? No, of course not. Like that's a terrible way to go through life, because you never really get any greater truth, because you never really reflect on anything. All you're doing is just being completely reactionary, and you're being externally observant as opposed to internally.
I know personally, actually, I just had a recent experience that really mirrors what you just talked about. I'm working with some freelance designers on this merch store, skepticalstuff.com, by the way. Check it out. Really funny designs on there.
Quick plug.
Great way to support the work that I do and so forth. Really solid designs, though. They're pretty funny. They have a message. One design, I was working with one designer, and we were having some disagreements about, you know, the workflow and so forth, and I was getting really frustrated with him to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm probably just gonna fucking fire this guy, quit working with him, and find someone else. And initially that was my reaction, but then I sort of stopped and asked myself, is there anything I'm doing here that's contributing to this? And I thought more about it and realized one of the things I was asking him to do wasn't exactly what was agreed upon. Basically, like, I pitched him a design idea. He made it very similar to how I asked for it. And I was sort of like, I'm not really feeling it. Let's try something else. And I was trying to get him to just like start from scratch and do a different one. And in the moment, I was just kind of frustrated. Like, he's not doing what I want. Fuck this guy. I'm going to find someone else. But then I realized, like, no, you know what? He did what I wanted, and I'm asking him to totally redo it. And I realized it was wrong. I apologized to him. We developed a different work relationship where it's going to be like, he'll present sketches first, and then we'll go from there. So he doesn't do all that work. So failing to stop and ask yourself, what am I doing wrong, can really put you in this position of always blaming other people for your problems, always bouncing from workplace to workplace or partner to partner, and never actually stopping to acknowledge your own mistakes and try to improve going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key right there. I mean, you know, obviously, we're like, if you're going to be kind of reactionary, then of course, like, the other person is pissing you off objectively for sure. But also, I mean, like I said, like, the only thing that you're responsible for is how you react to it. And often, if you do some self-reflection, then you're able to actually see that, you know, I do play a kind of a role in how I'm reacting for sure. And, you know, what can we do? How can we move forward? How can we make this more reasonable for both of us? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, another piece of advice I hear so often in the motivation and self-improvement community, which I fucking hate, is the people who say, you know, sleep less, 3 hours of sleep every night.
No.
Garbage advice. People saying, I wake up at 3 a.m., I'll work for 20 hours and only get 4 hours of sleep, and that's what you should do too. I absolutely hate that advice because you're not going to be operating at your full potential if you're tired.
Yeah.
Like, if one day of sleep deprivation will not kill you, and I'll have one day a week maybe where I wake up really early and don't get a lot of sleep, and I do that so that I can get something done within a certain timeline. If you're doing that every day, you're going to feel like trash, you're going to feel like dog shit, you're not going to be as confident. Mentally, you're not going to be anywhere near your potential. And I personally, I think what people should do is just wake up naturally. I don't even like the idea of setting alarms. I like the idea of going to bed at an early enough time that you can wake up naturally, your body gets whatever amount of sleep it needs, and that way you're so much more energized, so much more confident, you have so many better ideas, you're so much more capable of doing the important things in your life, compared against if you're on 4 hours sleep, you're a fucking zombie, and you just feel horrible all day. Like, that's no way to live your life.
I totally agree. Like, people will just like, God, it's so stupid. People will conflate just the time that you spend on something with the quality of the product. And like, look, there's a big difference, huge difference between working hard and working smart. Like, you know,
exactly.
Like,
I literally have that written down on my thing.
Oh, there you go. There you go. And we're linked up. But yeah, like, if there's a way that you can, you know, I read this really awesome quote about like my doctorate while I was in my first year. And so a person said, you know, people always say, you know, how much time should you be spending on your PhD? And someone really important to me said, a PhD should take the least amount of work possible without sacrificing productivity or quality. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like people say you spend like 20 hours in the week in the lab. What the fuck are you talking about? Like 20 hours a day. What the fuck? And I thought about it. And I'm like, no, that actually incentivizes you to work even more in some cases, because if you're not being efficient, you're going to have to work more in terms of to generate more quality data. However, if you're efficient and you're actually able to you know, produce work that's of a superior quality efficiently, then you won't be spending as much time, and you can actually use that time to spend on other things that you really enjoy. But it's all about the efficiency as opposed to just how much time you spend doing something. I feel like that's kind of like the misnomer that's like in society today for sure. Because people say like, what is it like with the it's like to master something or to get a hobby, you have to do it for like 5,000 hours, something like that. I forget what the saying is.
Yeah, the 10,000 hour rule. Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, sure, to like master the piano, you got to spend a lot of time doing it. But like, I feel like just like correlating competency with just time done, of course, you're going to be more receptive to being a master at something with more time under your belt. But I mean, it shouldn't delay other progress in other parts of your life. You should be efficient with whatever you want to do, and then the rest of your life should fall into suit naturally, not like you're denying other parts of your life just for this one thing.
Yeah, focused work is way more valuable than groggy, distracted work where you're checking your social media links. It's not just a matter of only putting in what you call work. You know, a lot of self-help people, it's like the phrase, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. They'll just say, work harder, do more, work harder. I definitely agree that that's an essential part of it, is working harder.
Of course, yeah.
Doing more is very important, but you have to also be striving to get better. You have to not just be working hard, like you said, but working smart as well. If you're only doing the same thing and you're just like, I'm just going to do more of it, that's not good enough. You have to find a way to do it better. Like, YouTube is the perfect example. If I never made any improvements to my video production style, if I was still making the same dog shit quality videos I was like 3 years ago when I started, and I was like, no, the solution is simply to do more of it, I don't feel like my channel would have grown as much, because it's not enough to just do more. You have to get better at what it is that you're doing and find ways to improve in the different areas. Those two in combination, I think that makes you fucking deadly. That makes you dangerous. When you're working hard and you're getting better at it, and you're working intelligently, and you're focused, and you're optimizing your mind, put all of those things together and you become dangerous.
Yeah, and you can only do that through semen retention too, so make sure you write that down, right?
Wait, what was that last part?
You can only do that, you know, all those amazing superpowers through semen retention. So you just got to make sure that
exactly. That's solid callback. I wish I heard that the first time, because that's good. Okay. That's a good callback. Well, before we close out, are there any final points you want to make on anything we talked about, or just anything else?
Not really, man. It was a great conversation. No, I really enjoyed this. You know, we covered a lot of like very diverse ground. I think we've both grown as human beings, from talking about MGTOW to semen retention to, you know, now self-help and general advice stuff. So I think it's been great, man. No, it's been fun.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. Where can these people connect with you and follow you?
You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/TheLoneChemist. I have my video essay channel, which is my main one. And then also, I moved all my podcast episodes to a different YouTube channel. I'll be posting podcasts. So it's The Lone Chemist Podcast. On Twitter, I am the Lone Chemist 1, and on Instagram, I am the Lone Chemist because someone stole my name on Twitter a couple years ago. Sad. But yeah, man, that's where you find me, and definitely want to do this again. So thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
For sure. Yep. Talk to you later.